evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Fight for Our Freedom Radio. And I'm your host, Badbaby. And tonight we have with us Ken Rolha, and we are going to talk about radiation and chemtrails and all kinds of interesting things. So you have to stay tuned to find out what we're going to be into. All righty then. Welcome to the show, Ken. How are you this evening?
I'm really well. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, we're honored to have you here. You're going to help us all out tonight. Like we were talking about earlier, a lot of the people that get into this show are targeted individuals, and they're radiated, and this kind of information is vital for someone that goes through something like that. Mm. But for those who don't know anything about you, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got into that field?
Okay. Well, basically, I teach natural healing, and I provide solutions to the best of my ability for all of these various threats we have to our health nowadays, and natural solutions to them. And so that entails detoxification, it entails getting nutrients into the body, it entails emotional healing and reprogramming of unconscious limiting beliefs or self-destructive beliefs. And so some of the stuff I do is very ancient, tried and true methods, and some of it's very cutting-edge modern technology and techniques.
The ancient methods, where did you find that information out? Did you research that, or did you acquire people that taught you these things?
Mostly, because I'm kind of lazy by nature, so mostly it was kind of spirit tricks where I got pulled into it, or I met people that showed me the way. So
they were supposed to meet you.
Yeah. Some of it was people. Some of it was, meeting shamans and gurus and swamis and various types of healers and things over the years that taught me things. And even having ET encounters, I learned some things from ETs that helped me with this stuff as well.
Interesting. I really do believe in ETs. I've interviewed quite a few people that have had ET encounters. I can't say that I have had one, but I believe that they're out there, and I don't know, I'm kind of like leery about it because I've heard that there are good ones and then there are bad ones. So why don't you tell me about that a little bit?
Well, yeah, from my experience, there are good ones and bad ones. I've been fortunate that I've had encounters with good ones, and I've been guided by them really my whole life. There are different kinds, of course. There are some that come here physically. There are others that are more like interdimensional beings that work through people, and some that can do both. My experience really is my entire life. I was having contact, but didn't realize it. As a young child, I had unusual experiences that I just discounted as unusual dreams, things like that. Waking up in the middle of the night and seeing, humanoid silhouettes in my bedroom backlit with light shining in the bedroom windows, that kind of thing. Having very vivid color dreams that were beyond real, that were really metaphors for getting information to me, and in order to not scare me. So it wasn't like
that's what I wanted to ask you. Did they explain to you that they were the good ones? How did you get to when you actually did realize that it was alien encounters? Did they explain to you that they were the good ones? No,
really the way it evolved was I was getting downloads of information all the time throughout my life, and into my mid-20s, I never knew it was anything coming from outside of me because it was all within my head, so I just assumed that all these things I was being shown, pictures and information and all that, it didn't seem like it was coming from somewhere else. I just thought it was coming from within.
Yeah, you just thought it was knowledge that you were acquiring on your own.
I mean, we all get this. It's just, we usually don't question where it's coming from, and I didn't really have any reason to. I mean, I was a young kid. I was just going with the usual program that we're all taught. And so it wasn't until my mid-20s when I was at a birthday party, and a met a really cool guy who gave me a book called Seth Speaks, which was some channeled information. And I read the book, and I was enthralled with it because there were all of these concepts and ideas in the book that I had within me that I had never heard anybody outside of me express, and I never discussed it with people, outside of me because I figured they'd think I was crazy. But here it all was in print. And so, the concept of channeling, all of a sudden I'm introduced to it, and I'm thinking, well, gosh, I wonder if some of this information that's coming to me is coming from somewhere else. And so I started having these conversations in my head, when this stuff would come out of the blue that was, I might be sitting, working on the computer or something and get some ideas from left field that would have absolutely nothing to do with what I was involved with. And so I started having these conversations with myself saying, well, is this coming from somewhere else? Is this me? What is it? And started getting messages that it was extraterrestrials. And I thought, okay, well, if I'm not just crazy and this is all in my head, then, I've got to meet you physically. And so ultimately these ETs showed me their reality and where they were coming from and all that kind of stuff. They were mostly reptilians, but there were a bunch of different races, and they were very benevolent. But they told me that that our DNA as human beings had been programmed to fear the reptilians, and that it would traumatize me severely if I actually encountered them physically. And so they refused to meet with me physically, but I persisted for several years, and eventually they did show themselves. I was out in the woods at a farm, and I was actually meditating, as it turns out, in a very fortuitous way. I had my feet dangling in a spring, and I was with another person who was there with me, and we had decided to go down this spring and meditate because we were actually at a party at the farm. And so as we're sitting there meditating, they start talking to me in my head, and I said, okay, well, what do you want? And they said, we are here, which they always said when they came in. And so I said, well, okay, well, what do you want? And they said, no, we are here physically. And as I'm hearing all of this, I said to the guy sitting next to me who was meditating, I said, you're not going to believe this, but I've got reptilian ETs talking to me in my head. And he said, yeah, they're talking to me too. And so I kept silent, and I still had my eyes closed. He had his eyes closed. We're meditating. And then finally they said, we are here physically. Open your eyes. So we both opened our eyes, and off in the distance, this was in a kind of a valley in some woods, and it was at sunset, so it was kind of backlit. And about 50 yards away in the woods, there were these three humanoid-looking reptilian ETs that were very, very large. Small one was probably about 12 feet high, and the large one was probably about 18 feet high. And they were very muscular but slender. They weren't wearing any clothes. They didn't seem to have any genitalia or anything. And I could see they were backlit, but I could see their skin was scaly, and they were dark olive drab for the most part from what I could see. And my first thought upon seeing them was, it's like, you got to be kidding me, because they had these ridges going down their head, these three ridges that looked like Mr. Worf on Star Trek. And so it really looked like somebody's conception from science fiction of what a reptilian would look like. And I'm sitting there trying to grok this and decide whether or not it's real. And the guy that was with me is doing the same thing. And I was double-taking and triple-taking and smacking myself in the face to see if it would disappear.
I would be too.
Yeah,
now,
and it wouldn't disappear.
Hey, they give you information, or they gave you information.
Well, not in that
instance. Are you familiar that we are being downloaded with all this radiation?
Well, I don't think we're being downloaded with the nuclear radiation. There's information coming in for millions and millions of people through consciousness, which is a form of scalar energy, which we can get into in a little bit. But in this case, they were there just to show me that they were actually real and that they existed. And I didn't touch them. I didn't want to at that point.
I would have been scared to death, really.
Well, I did. After I grokked what was going on, after about a minute, both me and the other guy got terrified and realized this is real, and we freaked out And I said, let's get the heck out of here. And he said, yeah, and we ran back to the farm. And nothing ever came of it except that night when I was going to sleep, they came in and talked to me in my head and said, we told you your DNA has been programmed to fear us. And they were right. And for a few years after that, I was terrified I was going to be abducted.
Did they say why we've been programmed to fear them?
Yeah, they said that there were master geneticists, reptilian master geneticists that had designed our structure and our DNA. They had taken humanoids that were on the planet, or hominids maybe you might say, thousands of years ago to help mine gold on the planet for some reptilians that had come here to get gold, to make monoatomic gold, to repair their atmosphere on a planet where they lived that had been destroyed by war and had destroyed their atmosphere, so they were fixing it with monoatomic gold, and apparently they needed a lot of it. And they needed help to mine the gold. So they apparently engineered some proto-humans that were on the planet at the time to be smarter and to be able to help them mine the gold, which became us. And supposedly that was how things got started. So they said that we started getting more powerful, or maybe too powerful, to control because we were very psychic, and consciousness creates reality. So once you start to understand that you truly create reality and can physically manipulate reality with your consciousness, then the control mechanisms start breaking down. So they had to unplug our DNA in parts to suppress the psychic abilities, which they said is what our scientists now call junk DNA. It's the DNA that they unplugged. But basically that's the story I was told. And then when I would tell people about that, sometimes they would say, oh, you've been reading Zecharia Sitchin. And I'd never heard of Zecharia Sitchin, but apparently he was an archaeologist who had made discoveries in Africa showing that there was this reptilian influence and that kind of stuff had been going on. And so that was kind of that was what I was told about their involvement with us.
Yeah, I never heard of them before a couple of years ago, and then I started delving into that subject a little bit. So I'm familiar with what you're talking about.
Yeah, and they're very much like humans from the standpoint that, you know, people, particularly online, want to categorize this kind of ET or that kind of ET into categories. These ones are evil, these ones are good, and these ones are minions of this, that, and the other. And it's not like that. I mean, they're multidimensional beings that exist throughout the cosmos, including us. You know, we're multidimensional. It's just most people don't realize it. And there are good ones, there are bad ones from our viewpoint.
Just like people.
Right, and there are reptilians. The particular ones that I met came from the Pleiades, and you never hear about that when people are talking about extraterrestrials, but they were working with Pleiadians and a bunch of others for the benefit of humankind, which was really also for their benefit, because they had said that what they put into place thousands of years ago here on this planet was affecting them very negatively in their time and place. And so they had to travel through time, so to speak, to alter things so that their reality would become less oppressive and self-destructive. So that's part of the very small part of the story of my interaction with them. They've given me many, many downloads over the years, lots of information that at the time I had absolutely no understanding of or any reason to know it. You know, it's like they would, like for a couple of years, they went on and on about gold and how ETs use gold for time travel and dimension travel because it remained the same through different dimensions of time and space. And I was like, okay, well, that's nice, but so what? And it wasn't until years later when I started working with solutions for various things that that information came in handy. And so I've just gotten all these kind of random downloads over many, many years that have kind of come together and given me a different worldview, but also given me information that I can use understanding the nature of matter and energy and various things so I can either find or create solutions for these threats to our health.
Are you familiar with Dr. Fred Bell?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he used gold in the pyramid thing too, and I wanted to have him on the show. In fact, I was working on it right when he passed away.
Yeah.
Sure, you know that wasn't an accident.
Right. Yeah, he got on Jesse Ventura's program, Conspiracy Theory, and I guess within 12 hours he was dead.
Yeah, he took a drink and then they said he started foaming from the mouth. That to me sounds like cyanide.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, and I guess he was the architect of some of the energy weapons programs for the U.S. government, so they don't want people talking about that.
No, well, this is what they're using on those targets, are these the same weapons, see, and he was using gold in a pyramid that he would sell that you could protect yourself with. So I guess gold is a big factor in this, huh?
Yeah, it has a frequency that is very healing, and of course, if it's in monoatomic form, it's extremely healing if it's ingested into the body. Because the way this works, the way cells heal and regenerate actually is they have superconducting minerals within them. The DNA, the brain neural pathways, the acupuncture meridians, and the chakras along the spine, they are composed, or they contain these superconducting minerals known as monoatomic minerals or ormus minerals. And superconductivity has very weird physics, and it's interdimensional. So it actually, while it's a form of gold, and rather than being metallic, it's actually ceramic and looks like a white ceramic powder. And it's multidimensional, meaning that it exists simultaneously in 3D space-time and other dimensions of time and space. And so it connects non-physical reality with physical reality, and within the body or any living organism, it connects consciousness with the physical structures of the body. So within us, we've got these superconducting minerals in these nodes along the nervous system that correspond to acupuncture meridians. So you've got these superconducting junctures there, which create interdimensional portals or black holes, if you want to call them that. And along the spine, you've got larger nodes of these superconducting minerals, which is where the chakras are, and the DNA, which is a superconducting antenna for consciousness. And it's not, by the way, the genetic blueprint. It's the carrier of the genetic blueprint. This has been proven now with epigenetics. You can damage the DNA and you can repair it because the pattern is in consciousness itself. And so if you understand that, you can ingest natural foods and living foods, particularly ones that are high in these monoatomic minerals, and they will plug into the places in the body where they're needed, and also in the third eye, in the pineal gland. It's very high in superconducting gold and rhodium and iridium. And you strengthen that mind-body connection, and then that allows your consciousness and the energetic pattern of a healthy body to come through into the physical structure and heal it. There's actually a former NASA nuclear engineer named Thomas Bearden who got a patent for a method for neutralizing radioactivity by studying how human cells regenerate. And he figured out that the way a cell gets its pattern, or a damaged cell or damaged DNA gets its pattern for a healthy cell to build a healthy cell, is it actually sends these high-frequency, faster-than-light waves of energy through the superconducting minerals back in time, and actually gets the pattern of the healthy cell from the past, and then brings it into the present to use as a pattern to structure the new healthy cell.
That almost sounds like time travel.
It is time travel. That's exactly what it is.
Oh, so you mean I can use my consciousness and go back to when I'm 15 and come back and be 15 again?
Well, potentially you could. I've met swamis and gurus who can do mind-blowing things altering matter, but what you can certainly do that anybody can do is use things like Kundalini energy exercises to heal and regenerate the body. And I've met bunches of people that have done that, healed major illnesses just by working with their consciousness. I've worked with a man named Dr. Art Martin, who is at EnergyMedicineInstitute.com out in California, and he's worked with lots of people just working with the unconscious mind to reprogram it and let go of self-destructive and limiting beliefs. And he's done things like help people heal cancer in a few hours, even major cancers. In 2 instances, he had some very interesting results with 2 different women at 2 different times that had been in car wrecks and had their C3, 4, and 5 vertebrae in their necks injured, and both were in a lot of pain. And the one lady, he worked on her 2 2-hour sessions, and the bones returned to normal. They had been fused together into one chunk of bone for years, and just in 4 hours, he was able to restructure them back to normal vertebrae.
Mm-hmm.
Her pain went away.
I saw a video online where a woman had a cancerous tumor, and she went to a hospital where they chanted, and they x-rayed her as they were doing the procedure and was showing the tumor completely go away.
Exactly. That's the power of consciousness. We have the ability to alter matter with our minds, and that is a big secret that the powers that be do not want people to know.
You know, it's funny that you said that, because as soon as I started delving into this subject, all hell broke loose in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I always was a target, but they did not I was slandered by all the other windows that I was putting voodooism into everybody's head and selling my snake oil.
Well, the beautiful thing now is that there are heavy-duty scientists, Nobel Prize winners, and all kinds of credentialed academics who are proving this. Dr. Bruce Lipton, for one, has been popularizing how consciousness creates reality, and he was a molecular biologist for many years looking at cells with electron microscopes. So it's getting out into the mainstream more and more and more, and there are people not just talking about it, but there are people taking it and applying it and getting results with it. Like Joe Dispenza, he wrote a book called Evolve Your Brain and all kinds of other books, and he does these workshops where people come and they work on consciousness, and people get healed of all kinds of stuff, all kinds of problems go away. So consciousness is the ultimate trump card, and the powers that be do not want average people to know that.
And we don't use all of our brain, do we, Ken?
Oh, not at all. Not at all. It's particularly, the majority of people on this planet are heavily mind-controlled through media and through society, through education systems that are controlled, and so they're most definitely not living consciously or using most of their brain. But even people who spend a lot of time developing their brain consciousness, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time. I've met Indian gurus, for example, who literally can walk on water and levitate and alter matter with their minds and things like that. And I've seen it
walk on hot coals.
Right, but it takes, 14, 15, 20 years of meditation, 12 to 14 hours a day to reach that point, and detoxifying the physical body. So most people aren't willing or in a position where they can do that. But there are other ways to do it and get what we need within the reality that we're operating in.
Let's talk about radiation. What is Fukushima doing to our bodies?
Well, first of all, it's not good. There are some people saying that, that this is meant to be and that the radiation is helping us to evolve our consciousness. That's absolute nonsense, because all you've got to do is look at your body and you can test it and you can see what the radiation is doing to it, and it doesn't do anything good.
Yeah.
It's causing thyroid problems. It's causing all kinds of disease. Millions of people are dying prematurely. Mortality rates have gone way up around the world, specifically from radiation from Chernobyl and now Fukushima. So that is a major misconception if people think that it's elevating consciousness. It absolutely is not.
And I'm also hearing a lot of stories about some of the plants in the United States are leaking, that they're catching there was one in Washington State, and also there was another one, I can't remember what state it was, but I believe there are problems with ours, but they just keep it from us.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there are a few independent organizations that are measuring radiation levels, not modeling it, but actually measuring it out in the ocean. Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, for example, they were taking samples all across the Pacific, and initially they were reporting high levels of radiation, and I've noticed lately that they probably have been suppressed because it seems like their information is watered down now. But I see it from working with people that there are pandemics of thyroid problems and other problems related to radiation poisoning, and it's also well documented that U.S. water supplies and global water supplies are now loaded with various radioactive isotopes. I mean, that's just rare conventional mainstream science is showing that.
Now, I've had people on that, well, Paul Gunter, he said, oh, you can still swim in the ocean over there. And I've had people call me from California and tell me that they get sick just being out in their yard, they get dizzy, they get nauseous. And there was one person that was taking a Geiger counter down to the ocean, and it was going way, way over the safety level.
Well, I saw one YouTube video of where somebody did that. I think it was in the San Francisco area, and it turned out to be natural forms of radiation, which are very different than these nuclear isotopes from power plants and bombs and such like that. Natural radiation, because this is one of the arguments that the nuclear industry and their shills will put out, is that like, oh, well, there's radiation in bananas, you know. Well, those types of radiation are found in nature. They are very, very different than the man-made nuclides and isotopes that are coming out of these various pollution sources. And they can be flushed out of the body. The body can handle them in normal background radiation amounts and flush it out of the body. So radiation in bananas or whatever, the body can get rid of it. But cesium-137 and things like that, heck no, the body's not going to be getting rid of it. And it's going to cause major disease in the body. And so there are ways to get them out of the body and also transmute them within the body, which is something that a lot of people don't realize. And so those are the kinds of things that I focus upon, is, you know, like what supplements and minerals and things can do that. These monoatomic elements, also known as ORMUS elements, are one of the things that you can ingest that will mutate or remove radioactive elements from the body and make them non-radioactive. And so how do you find these elements? You know, how do you get them into food? They are naturally made in nature through bacteria in soil eating minerals in the soil and breaking them down. You know, rocks and boulders have to be broken down into tiny particles that plants can uptake. And so the way that happens is plants actually secrete chemistry that attract certain microbes and bacteria to their roots that will break down specific minerals that plant needs. And so you've got this whole ecosystem of fungi and fungi roots called mycelium and bacteria in soil that eat rocks and break them down into particle sizes of just a few atoms or these monoatomic elements. And the monoatomic elements are the platinum group metals and gold and silver and mercury and copper. And in that form, these monoatomics are extremely healing. So plants will uptake them when they're present in the soil, and then if you ingest those plants, they will help heal you. So there are things that you can do to radically increase their content in your food, either by feeding rock powders, like volcanic rock powders, which are high in these elements, to plants, and adding microbes into the soil to make the process more efficient. There's very inexpensive microbes that you can add to soil that will do this. So you can feed plants and create your own superfood plants that you can eat, which will heal you. Or you can use fermentation by taking microbe mixtures. For example, we have one on my website at freshandalive.com called Effective Microorganisms. It was invented by a Japanese agriculture professor named Teruo Higa. And Dr. Higa experimented for many years attempting to use microbes to improve agriculture and failed miserably. And in disgust, he wound up throwing out all of his microbes after 30 years of failure. And when he threw them out, he dumped them on a compost pile. And the mixture of microbes that he threw out actually had a synergistic effect. And the compost pile just took off with growth and broke down very quickly. And so he realized it was a synergetic mixture, or synergistic mixture of microbes that make soil healthy. And so he developed that, and now you can buy it. And not only can you buy it, but you can make it yourself very simply by getting the culture and mixing it with water and molasses, and you can reproduce gallons and gallons of it. And so you put that on the soil, watered down, many thousands of parts of water per one part of these microbes, put down some rock powders, and the plants will uptake it, and you get very high ormus plants. But you can also throw those minerals into a brew of that microbe mixture and ferment it for a few months, and then you'll have gallons and gallons of it, which not only can you feed the plants, but you can ingest it yourself. And it is a massive probiotic. It's a massive antioxidant. It's very healing. It's high in ormus, and that stuff can keep you healthy as well. So,
and is that how you get the radiation damage out of your body?
That, along with doing other things like ingesting, there are some minerals called zeolites that you can get that are very effective at pulling radioactive elements out of the body. I've got some on my website. There's a brand called Clear TRS that's very effective at it. There are many different foods and herbs that are very powerful at pulling radiation out of the body and radioactive particles out. There's brown seaweed extract. There's apple pectin, which was used very extensively with great effect after Chernobyl. There are herbal formulas like godsherbs.com has a radiation formula, ashwagandha, anything high in chlorophyll like chlorella or blue-green algae or wheatgrass juice or spirulina, those will pull radiation out of the body. Sodium alginate will pull radiation out of the body. Liposomal vitamin C has been used with great effect in Japan, combined with lecithin. Ginseng, coconut oil, there's tons of things that will pull this stuff out of the body. That's the good news.
Wow.
So
we need you really bad because we all get radiated, and we all that are targets get crippled from being radiated. In fact, I'm one. And a lot of us get poisoned over and over again. I don't know what it is they're using. It's an orange, thick kind of poison.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether it's Agent Orange or what, but it takes its toll on our bodies.
Yeah. Yeah, and chemtrailing also, they're finding all kinds of nasty stuff in chemtrails. And
well, my garden won't grow anymore. It dies from the bottom up.
Well, this is
I live on a farm, quote unquote, that used to have tomato plants that would grow 5 feet tall.
Well, the good news is you can turn that around with these microbes and rock powders. You just spray your garden with rock powders and spray these microbes periodically, maybe once a month, and the microbes will break down those toxic elements into non-toxic elements, and you can grow stuff again to great effect.
To get with you and order some, why don't you, for the listeners that came in a little bit late, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you at and how we can get a hold of you? And for those that called in, if you have a question for Ken, push *8 and we will unmute you and you can ask him a question. Go ahead, Ken. Tell everybody how we can get a hold of you.
Okay. Well, my main website is freshandalive.com. My blog is freshandalive.com. freshandaliveblog.com. And I have a YouTube channel. If you just search on Ken Rolha, Rohla, you can find me on YouTube, or you can go to my website and I've got links to it. And then you can sign up for my newsletter, and you can get information through my newsletter. You can also, if you want me to come to where you are in the world and teach, I can do that. You can contact me about doing that. So I'll be doing a lot more video and things online this year, and we'll have more DVDs and things like that out this year so people can access the information.
And you have a lot of videos up on YouTube, too.
Right.
And also they can find you on Facebook, too.
Correct. I do post a lot of stuff on Facebook, a lot of cutting-edge information on Facebook all the time, and that's probably the best place to get regular updates.
That's where I found you.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's funny because when you said, that you met these people, I really do feel that everybody that comes into our life was in the plan.
Most definitely. I mean, I can tell when I listen sometimes to people on radio interviews or when when I'm talking to certain people, I can tell from what they're saying if they've had ET contact and if they're getting downloads, because I've been told certain things over the years and I've learned certain things over the years, and so when I see other people that are either developing solutions or technologies or talking about things, I can tell usually if they've had ET contact.
Well, I have a theory on why a lot of the targets get targeted. I don't know if I'm correct, but I always did wonder, because I know just about all the people that I know that are targeted are very highly intelligent people.
Yeah, and it also, if you're threatening somebody's purse strings, then you might get targeted. I worked with people back in the early 90s who developed free energy technology, and I've met a lot of inventors of free energy technology. And, they were touring the country and filling stadiums full of people and presenting this water-fueled technology that not only could power everything on the planet non-toxically, but it could clean up all the pollution on the planet and it could neutralize radioactivity. And just either pick any one of those, that could get you killed. I mean, Ewell Brown, the man who developed that technology at the time, was shot at a few times, and ultimately I heard that he was killed. But radioactivity, neutralizing radioactivity, there are actually 61 patents worldwide for the transmutation of radioactive elements to non-radioactive or less radioactive. 8 of those patents are in Japan. So there's many solutions, and by very credentialed people too. Back in 1975, there was a professor emeritus of physics at Arizona State University named Radha Roy. That's spelled Radharoy. You can Google the Roy process, and you can see this information, or you can just go to my website. I have a page on solutions on my website. If you go to radiationlinks.freshandalive.com, you can see this. But, Roy and bunches of other people have developed methods for completely neutralizing radioactivity very quickly. The problem is that it threatens not just the nuclear power industry, but more importantly, the nuclear weapons industry, which is the real purpose of making these radioactive elements, mining them and refining them, is not for the nuclear power industry. The power industry is a justification for the weapons industry. But the countries that have nuclear weapons do not want to let that nuclear advantage go. So they're willing to kill people and get rid of them in various ways to prevent the nuclear industry, and particularly nuclear waste industry as well, from going away, because there's billions of dollars being made on disposal of nuclear waste, which is utterly nonsensical because they're just burying this radioactive stuff underground like it's going to go away.
Yeah, are you familiar with Paul Gunter?
No, I'm not. Not with Paul Gunter, no.
I've had him on. He's been in the nuclear power industry for over 38 years, and he's a whistleblower on what they're doing with the waste and all this, and he says, they're burying it all.
Yeah.
In fact, he got targeted because he caught them violating regulations.
Oh, that's it. I mean, it's such utter nonsense. And, I had dinner one time with the CEO of the largest nuclear waste disposal company in the United States, and he's got a PhD in nuclear engineering, and I was working with this water-filled technology with Ewell Brown that could neutralize radioactivity. So I said to him, hey, well, look, he was lamenting that all of these ecological groups and activists were protesting against the siting of a nuclear dump where we lived, which was crazy because they were going to put it on a fault line, for one thing, and close to a major city. And I said, well, here's this solution for neutralizing all that stuff. Why don't you come take a look at it? And he absolutely refused to believe that it was even possible because it went against what he had been taught in school.
Right.
And that's part of the problem that we have with all of this, is that mainstream scientists get programmed with what they were taught in school.
I was just going to say, it's part of the programming, isn't it?
And then they believe it and they don't question, or they have financial reasons to not to investigate it. And so, we've got that to deal with as well. But there are a lot of good people in various positions throughout the world, even in, these agencies and governments, like your whistleblower friend, who know better and are getting the information out about the truth of all of this stuff. Some of them know about prize winners and very eminent scientists. So, things are going to change, and they're going to change, I think, very quickly when they do. I just do not believe that we have all of these solutions that I've seen for all of these physical problems on our planet that are just waiting in the wings. I just don't believe that we're going to go up in a puff of smoke. I think that at some point there's going to reach a tipping point where too many people within the system are going to get fed up with what's going on.
That's what I feel. We're going to come to a breaking point.
Yeah.
We need people to wake up.
Yeah, I think in the United States it's not going to happen until the average American's Humvees and hamburgers are taken away from them. And once that starts happening, then you'll probably start seeing people protesting it. But it also is going to have to come from positions of power and leadership in the world. And it is, there's an alliance of countries that's been formed called the BRICS Alliance. And, of course, they've got their agendas, but they're opposing a lot of things that the U.S. and the G8 countries are doing, a lot of this manipulation. So there's definitely hope, and I'm very optimistic because I've seen these solutions. I've worked with water fuel. I've worked with a lot of people and know a lot of scientists and inventors who have solutions of all kinds. So I'm very optimistic about it all.
So explain to us, Ken, about scalar energy.
Okay. Well, basically there is this energy that travels throughout the cosmos at way beyond what we've been told is the speed of light. And in fact, it is light. It's photonic energy, but it travels far, far beyond the speed of light that we've been told. And by the way, the speed of light itself, there are people, particularly conventional scientists, will tell you that, nothing can go beyond the speed of light. It's been proven, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's not true. It's been proven time and time again that the speed of light is not even constant. It can be affected by gravitational fields and all kinds of stuff. But there's this energy that's flowing through the cosmos, and it's kind of like the Force in Star Wars. It comes spiraling out from the centers of galaxies, and it's probably being relayed from other places as well. But it's multidimensional energy that's going much faster than the speed of light, but it is light, it's photons. And as it comes spiraling out, the galaxy, when you look at a picture of a galaxy, it looks like a big pinwheel, but energetically what it really is a giant donut. And so you have this energy come flying out of the center of the donut, and it spirals outward around the surface of the donut, and it's relayed from the center of the galaxy through the suns at the center of the galaxy outward, from sun to sun to sun, outward to the suns farther out. It's been discovered by various people that there are singularities or black hole, white hole combinations at the centers of suns and planets, and they act like relays for this energy. So at the center of the galaxy, you've got these really huge suns. They're emitting large amounts of this energy through these singularities at the centers of them, outward to the next sun, to the next sun, to the next sun. And as this energy is going, it's spiraling and it's branching or fractaling. So you've got this huge energy system of this energy that's spiraling outward from the center of the galaxy being relayed to us through the suns. It's branching and fractaling as it goes. And when it gets to us, it's coming down to us from our sun with its singularity, and it's coming up from the center of the Earth because it has a singularity there. And this is why these various practices like Tai Chi and Qigong and Ayurveda, all these different practices of working with energy and energy manipulation, Kundalini yoga, for example, and other forms of yoga, they talk about bringing energy up from the low, from the ground, up through the root and the root chakra, and bringing it down from above. Well, what you're doing is you're using your own consciousness, your brain, your nervous system, which is a scalar wave transceiver system, to capture that energy and turn it into the matter and energy that we can see and measure. And so when you're doing this, I mean, this is how people, for example, heal major diseases, by sitting and running energy up and down their spines and visualizing things and that kind of stuff. Your brain, well, the whole cosmos actually is just this big web of singularities or black hole, white hole combinations. And as above, so below. It doesn't end at the galactic level. At the human level, our bodies are full of black holes. That's what the acupuncture meridians and the chakras are. At a cellular level, there are black holes. At the atomic level, there are black holes, and subatomic. So it goes on ad infinitum from the galactic to the subatomic, and this fast and light energy is flowing through it all. Scientists nowadays are calling it scalar waves or torsion waves or various things. It's, you know, but throughout history it's been called chi or prana or tachyon energy or you know, any other names that we're familiar with. But it's the energy of consciousness, and what I really believe it is God consciousness. It's this intelligent consciousness of what we would call God flowing through everything, and we can take it with our brains, which is a scalar wave transceiver, and we can capture it, and then we can use it to create fields that where this energy will slow down and coagulate into physical matter or electromagnetic energy that we can measure. And so that's how we're creating our reality moment by moment. We are literally creating our reality moment by moment, individually and collectively. It's not some metaphor. So that's a very long answer, but that's basically what scalar waves are, or torsion waves.
So we can actually use that technique to change our situation that we're in.
Oh, absolutely. You could sit out in your yard, for example, with a meditation circle and clear chemtrails. I mean, people do it.
Yeah.
You know, of course, you have to be out there all the time. But
I had one of my listeners send me some Ormus pucks, and I noticed a difference in my area of my home when I used them.
Yeah, you know, Ormus is, there are different ways of making it, and some people make it with alchemical methods, and I'm not a big fan of ingesting it for the alchemical stuff. I'd rather make it the way that nature makes it, which is either fermentation or photosynthesis or vortexing water in magnetic fields. But there are methods for making it with high heat, or taking, for example, Dead Sea salt and mixing it with lye and hitting certain pHs and precipitating out this powder that is not particularly Ormus, but it is an Ormus-bearing precipitate that can be ingested. But the problem with ingesting those forms of Ormus, those unnatural forms, is it plugs into the body in these junctures, and it artificially raises the superconductivity. And when you do it artificially, consciousness doesn't evolve with it, and so you can wind up, what ultimately what happens is that normal safety buffer that we have for creating our reality is time. So if you want to manifest something in your life, you have to focus on it, and it takes some time. Sometimes it happens faster than others, but there's a time buffer there. But when you ingest these alchemical forms of Ormus, it radically reduces that time between thought and manifestation of thought, and then you wind up creating things that you didn't necessarily want to create that would normally take more focus and more energy. And so you can create a nightmare for yourself that way.
Yeah.
So I don't recommend those forms for ingesting. But you can take them and feed them to plants or ferments and get phenomenal results.
Yeah, the one man that I had on, Barry, I can't think of his last name. He gave me a recipe for making Ormus out of sea salt, and I used it on a lot of my plants out there. It didn't help the garden, but it did help the trees and things like that.
Yes, and for the people that are interested in doing that, there's a book called Ormus, Modern Day Alchemy. That's ORMUS, Modern Day Alchemy, on Amazon, various places. You can buy that, and there's something in there called the wet method, and you can use that with salt, mineral salts to make Ormus. Just like I say, I wouldn't experiment too much with ingesting it. I would use it with plants or ferments.
Yeah, I didn't ingest it. I'm real funny about what I put in my body since I found out all my technology stuff.
Well, especially if you're using Dead Sea salts, there are a lot of toxic metals in Dead Sea salts and many salts that when you run it through that process, it concentrates them and releases them in a toxic form that you do not want to be ingesting. And actually, Dead Sea salt you can't ingest anyway. It's very toxic. So it's not a good idea to be making that stuff and ingesting. It's better to feed the plants.
Oh, my salt intake is Celtic or Himalayan.
Mm-hmm. There's also a product we have on our website called Concentrace Liquid Sea Minerals, and it's liquid sea minerals from the Great Salt Lake in Utah, and that they remove the sodium, so there's high concentrations of minerals that are bioavailable without all the sodium, and the minerals are in the exact ratio that the human body needs, because seawater and sea salt has the exact ratio of minerals that the human body has. So that's a good way of getting a natural balance and not throwing the mineral balance off in the body.
We are not getting our minerals out of our food anymore, are we?
No, it's not in there, and you don't have to take my word for it. You can test it yourself. If you go to eBay, for about $30 to $50, you can buy a device called a refractometer or a Brix meter, which is like a little telescope, and you can take plant juices and squeeze them and put them on the lens of this thing, and it will measure the nutrient levels and the sugar levels in it, and it will give you a reading, and you can compare that with a chart of what different foods should have in them, and you can see that even organic food, for the most part, is radically deficient in minerals and nutrients.
See, this is what people don't understand. When they get cancer, they go, "Oh, I got cancer," like they caught it, and they don't understand that they got it because of what they're doing to our bodies through what we're ingesting.
Right, and other things as well. But in general, cancer is a disease of toxicity and acidity in the body, and so you have to alkalize the body. You have to get nutrients in, and you have to get waste out. But there's also a strong emotional component too, and so if you don't deal with the emotions, there's always anger tied in with cancer. And so you've got to heal the emotions and work on the mind and the emotions. If you don't do that, you might be successful in the short term, but you'll wind up getting it again if you don't deal with the deeper emotions involved with it.
And it makes sense. Now, for a person that's targeted and being microwaved and poisoned all the time, what would you recommend for a person going through that?
Well, probably first thing would be to move somewhere that's less dangerous.
Let me tell you, honey, you just can't move. This is worldwide, and it follows you wherever you go.
Well, I've had friends that have been targeted, and they've moved to other countries, and they've been pretty successful at not.
Really?
Of course,
I'm sure a lot of the targets would like to know what country they're in.
Well, I've got one friend in Chile and some South American countries. It's really a matter of kind of, it depends on why you're being targeted and what you've been doing, and also if you're still vocalizing. It's like if you're doing anything that's going to be interfering with the purse strings or the agendas of the power elite, then depending on how big of a threat it is to their agendas, they'll hunt you down no matter where you're out on the planet.
Right, just like they did Fred Bell.
Yeah, exactly. So, it depends on how brazen you are and what you're doing. But it also depends on what kinds of targeting, what kind of weapons and things they're using. I had a friend who was, she's a medical doctor, and she wrote a book about the dangers of breast implants, and, she was very respected in that field, and she had real solutions for it. And when the book came out, she was targeted not by governments, but by a corporation that was the largest manufacturer of breast implants in the world. And they were using high-energy microwave weapons, and they shot her with these weapons, and she said her insides started cooking. And she had to, this was, I guess, at the front door of her house, and she had to retreat inside the house. And she wound up, I guess she had a friend. It messed her up pretty bad, but she had a friend who was a healer who had been in the CIA, and through his contacts, he found out that it was not government, it was a corporate attack, and he found out, who the assassins were, apparently, because they were dumb enough to let their license plates be seen. And so he got it stopped, by the FBI. But it depends on, who's targeting and why they're targeting it, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If it's low-level targeting with, low-level energy weapons and things like that, there are things you can do to protect yourself. I've got a device called a rest shield that's a pyramid that puts out a 20-foot radius scalar field, and it's designed to get people into deep sleep and de-stress them and protect against EMF, but it will protect against low-level radiation like HAARP and Gwen towers and things like that.
Well, why don't you explain that to us a little bit?
Well, years ago I was studying Tesla's work and other people's work with subtle energy, and Tesla had developed this thing called a personal oscillator, and basically it puts out scalar waves that pulse at the Schumann resonance, which is a pulsing in the Earth's atmosphere that is supposed to be there, that gets our brain and nervous systems entrained with it. Our bodies and our cells and our nervous system, our brain, they're all designed to entrain with pulses coming from the Earth, and really it's coming from the cosmos. It comes from cosmic radiation and solar radiation and even lightning. All of that energy comes down and hits the surface of the Earth, and then it bounces back up and it hits the ionosphere, and then it just keeps bouncing back and forth. And so it does that at several different frequencies, but the overall frequency is about 7.86 hertz. And that pulsing is like a mother's heartbeat to a child. It slows the brain down and relaxes the body and the cells and keeps us healthy and relaxed. And when we go to sleep at night, it gets us into the deepest brainwave states of delta and theta and gamma. But because of all the man-made EMF on the planet and various things, that pulsing has accelerated to almost double of what it should be. And so rather than relaxing us and calming us down, it's stressing us out at a low level. So I developed this device that puts out a pulse at the same frequency as the original Schumann resonance using scalar waves. And it puts out about a 20-foot radius field, and it's pulsing at this frequency. And so what it does is it puts the body or any living organism into the old Schumann resonance pulse, and so therefore it de-stresses the organism, and then that accelerates healing. It accelerates deep sleep, or I shouldn't say accelerates, but it promotes deep sleep, and it protects against EMF and various things like that. So, some of it kind of came to me. I spent a lot of time experimenting with it and getting ideas and trying them out and refining it over the years. And so that, it turned out that it had all these side benefits I wasn't expecting. It will make plants grow faster and better because it de-stresses them. Same thing with microbes, but only beneficial microbes. Parasites and pathogens don't like the frequency, so it suppresses them, and it promotes the growth of probiotics. But it also, if you're fermenting foods and things like that, you'll get better results when you're fermenting. And so that's basically what, I've got.
Do you sell that device?
I do. It's on my website. It's called the Rest Shield. It's a pyramid-shaped device. And then we also have some static devices, the discs and little things that are made with crystals and minerals that capture this scalar energy traveling through the cosmos and bring it into a localized area and create a localized scalar field. They're not as powerful as a scalar wave generator like the pyramid, but they do help with EMF and sleep and stress and those kinds of things. So we have people use them for various things. Sometimes weird things. I make these things thinking that it's for one purpose, and then people will go and use it for all kinds of crazy things I never thought about. One lady told me she was putting one of my scalar discs in her refrigerator, and it made her food last longer and taste better. Which makes sense because it will.
And I bet you it probably made it more nutritious.
I don't know. I don't know if it did that, but it will structure water beneficially because water is a liquid crystal, and the H2O molecules, they're always in this dynamic state where they like to cluster together in groups of 6, but they only do it for an extremely brief amount of time, and then they let go and grab onto others. But when they're holding on to each other, they like to be in hexagonal structures, and healthy water does that. And healthy water that's in those hexagonal configurations, the bond angle of the H2O molecules are different, and so the molecules can get into the cells and hydrate them better, and those kinds of things. So these scalar disks will structure water beneficially, or any kind of scalar field in the right frequencies will structure water and make it more beneficial, more hydrating, and taste better. So, some people, for example, will put food on one of my discs and let it sit for 5 or 10 minutes, and, they tell me it tastes better. But you can put it next to water, and you can structure water, and you can freeze the water, and you can see a different crystallization pattern. So there, you can see some evidence of this just in some basic tests that you can do.
Okay, why don't you tell us a little bit about why they're chemtrailing us?
Well, I don't have any factual information because I don't have any inside information, but my impression from looking at what is being said from reliable sources, multiple agendas. I think one of them is population reduction. In my workshops, I teach about a lot of different things, and one of them is about population, and the United Nations studies of population, and the United Nations, they study population growth very intently, and they're concerned about it, and so there's a lot of concern within certain organizations on the planet about, too many people on this planet. And the truth is, there aren't too many people on this planet. It's just using the stupid paradigms that we have with energy production and medicine and everything that we're doing, food production, all of it is unsustainable and stupid in the way that we're doing it. But if you're an industrialist invested in those methodologies, rather than change the methodologies to sustainable ones, they'd rather just get rid of people off the planet, I think. And so, you see, for example, Bill Gates talking about this in various talks he's done.
Oh, yeah, we can reduce population real well through vaccinations, and people don't hear exactly what he's saying.
Exactly. So I think one agenda is population reduction. I think that's one of the major agendas. There's also military agendas because the militaries of the world want to engage in weather modification and control for battle purposes and probably other purposes. For example, you can go online and Google owning the weather by 2025, and you will come across a link to a PDF document on the Air Force's, one of their websites that has this 57-page research study that they did on weather modification, and it's shockingly blatant about their agendas. They spell it out right there. Hey, we want to control the weather for all these various reasons, including owning, battlefield weather and that kind of stuff. So there's that agenda. There's also making money, which is always behind all of these agendas. For example, now on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, you've got weather futures being traded. So, for example, a company that is invested in crop production or agriculture, they can actually bet against themselves so that if there is a crop failure, they can actually make more money with weather futures than if their crop fails than if the crop succeeds. So there's no longer the same motivation to produce food, despite what some of them say, than there used to be. And I'm sure there's political agendas and warfare agendas, so I think there's multiple agendas, but one of them certainly seems to be population reduction because the scientists who are publicly talking about geoengineering, they're stating that it's to combat climate change or global warming or whatever. But if it was really about that, they wouldn't be using the toxic metals and other things that they're putting into these geoengineering mixes, these aerosols that they're spraying. Because, for example, there's a Harvard professor named David Keith who cites that they got the idea from spraying these aerosols from observing what happens after a volcano erupts. Because when volcanoes erupt, they shoot out huge amounts of ash up in the atmosphere that covers millions of miles, and or not millions of miles, but millions of acres, and it will come down and mineralize the earth, which is actually a very good thing. But while it's up in the air, it blocks sunlight, and it reduces the global temperature by about a half degree. So they said, well, we can do the same thing. We'll spray these metal particles up there and do the same thing. But the problem with the metal particles is they stay up too long, and then they act like an insulating blanket on the dark side of the planet, so they don't reduce the temperature of the earth. They, in fact, heat the earth up. And they poison, of course, the heck out of the planet. David Keith only admits to them spraying sulfuric acid in the atmosphere, which, that alone, of course, creates acid rain and acidification of the oceans, which destroys all life on the planet. But they're, of course, testing is showing they're spraying aluminum aerosols and barium and strontium. And aluminum specifically blocks uptake of minerals in plants in the soil. And it's also a fire accelerant. So when it comes down onto plants and forests, you get these horrific forest fires like we've seen out in California and places like that.
That's what I heard, that the trees are absorbing it and they're just becoming like candlesticks. That's why they're having those horrendous fires.
Exactly. Yeah, it stunts their growth, and they become a fire hazard. Aluminum powder they put into fireworks to make them blow up. So it's utterly stupid unless your agenda is other than what they're stating.
Did you happen to see that accident that they had up here in Michigan where the one semi was full of fireworks?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, they had a 145-car pileup on I-94, and in the middle of it was a semi that was full of fireworks, and it went off.
Wow.
They had, I think it was like 30 people injured. One truck driver from Canada was killed. It was horrible.
Wow,
horrible.
I bet. I've seen videos of fireworks factories go off, and I know it's just unbelievable.
So, I don't like being out when it rains. If I get rained on, I come in and wash it off right away.
I think that's a good idea. I've measured rain in our area and around Florida, and at times it definitely has very elevated amounts of radiation in it. And so I just saying I avoid if I've got to get out in the rain, I definitely use an umbrella and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And keep it off of me.
Yeah, there was one. It's weird too because we talk about the telepathic communication. There was one time I was way out at the other end of my property, and it started pouring rain, and I got soaked. And as soon as I got in the house, I was told to shower that off.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, especially, it really doesn't matter if you're living on the west coast or the east coast of the United States, because there have already been studies done extensively just with Chernobyl showing, which, was not as bad as Fukushima, showing mortality rates going up across the east coast, and water supplies being polluted. I think Pennsylvania, there were tests done in various water supplies around Pennsylvania showing cesium-137 in the water, and there's been similar studies in other states. So, yeah, I wouldn't, I personally, I live on the Atlantic Ocean. I will not swim in it after the Gulf oil spill and
oh my
all
God,
the
and all the stuff they
dumped.
sprayed down there in the water.
Yeah.
Now, there was a guy that I saw that was going to be in the Marines, and he was swimming to train before he went in, and he ended up having like MS.
Yeah, it's not surprising. We're living in a toxic world, and that's why we have to detox every day. Every day I take a cocktail of nutrients and detoxifiers, including zeolites and blue-green algae and various minerals that will pull these things out. So most definitely, we've got to be detoxing
I've been
every day.
detoxing, but I don't do it every day, and that must be why I'm yo-yoing back and forth, isn't it?
Yes, most definitely.
Because I'll get better and then I'll get sick again. But then, they never leave me alone.
Well, that's it. And the older you get, the worse that happens because, it accumulates over time. And so if you don't specifically heal the glands and the thyroid especially and detox the body at a cellular level, it's just going to get worse. And when you do, if you ingest foods that do detoxify the body and you're very toxic, then when you dump that waste, you're going to feel crappy. And so you may go through these cycles of feeling bad and not feeling bad depending on what you're doing with your diet. So that's why, doing a couple of strong detoxes per year and then doing daily detoxification in today's era is really important. And, I was just, I've been telling my staff for quite a while, because I've got a couple of young people on my staff, that, the current generation of young people is not going to live as long as their parents. And this is not just conjecture. Economists now are actually stating this in their financial projections. I actually got a financial newsletter the other day that was talking about how the demand for real estate is not going to be going up. It's going to be going down because more people are dying now than are being born. And so, and the younger generation, their mortality rates are increasing extensively. So, in general, the younger generation, unless they're doing detoxification and doing these extraordinary things, they won't live as long as their parents, and we won't live as long as our parents.
Boy, they sure are playing with humanity, aren't they, Ken?
Yeah, and, I mention this to people that wonder why, because a lot of people think it's all conspiracy theory, which is so simple to disprove, because all you got to do is do some Googling, and you can see these scientists that are doing it, admitting it, and having conferences about it. But, everybody wants to know why, and, I don't know all the reasons for why, but I do know that part of the reason you're seeing all of this sociopathic and psychopathic behavior with our so-called leaders is because they've been in cahoots for thousands of years with extraterrestrials, and this, most extraterrestrials, in my experience, from what I see, are benevolent, but they do have non-interference agreements where they can't just come in and show up and say, hey, we're here and we're going to fix everything, because they've tried that in the past and it doesn't work, because it shatters people's worldviews and it creates all these negative repercussions. So they've learned they can't just step in and fix things. They have to work kind of behind the scenes to get us to fix things, or get to the point where we evolve to where we can handle them coming in and helping us. But the negative ETs, they've been manipulating things behind the scenes ever since humans have been here. And the people that have the power and the money at the very high levels, they are having interactions with extraterrestrials, and they're getting secret information and technology in exchange for, basically feeding these extraterrestrials, because the interdimensional ones, they actually feed off of human emotional energy, which is scalar waves. Scalar waves are this universal energy, this fast-as-light energy that slows down and can turn into matter and energy. And ETs know very well about it, and they can harvest it. And so that's exactly what I've been told is going on, is that this planet has been set up much like a farm, and we are generators of scalar waves, or scalar energy, that through our emotions, our brain waves and emotional energy are scalar waves. And these ETs harvest it interdimensionally, and they give the powers that be knowledge and information to maintain their control and power. And in exchange, they set up institutions like religion or sports or various things, and pump fear through all of it, so that people remain in this fear vibration, feeding these ETs.
Yeah, and they can feed, Dr. Carly, I had her on a few months ago, and she was saying that they forced her, she does not practice anymore, but she said they forced her to perform an operation on a man who had gangrene in his leg, and it needed to be amputated, and they did it without anesthetic. And she said when she cut through his sciatic nerve in his leg, she'll never forget the scream. And she said, and these monsters that call themselves people, but I don't think they were people, were feeding off of his pain, off of his adrenal gland pain.
Yeah, and that's it. A lot of these human beings are possessed by non-physical beings, and so they're, some of them are getting it that way. But, it kind of reminds me of what you're describing of the Montauk time travel experiments, because they were using children and torturing them and sexually abusing them to generate sexual energy to do time travel with.
Oh, he's a good friend of mine. He's going to be on next month.
Yeah, and to a lot of people that would sound like absolute nonsense, but when you understand consciousness is scalar energy and you can do things with it, including transport things through time and space, it makes sense that in their initial attempts at time travel, or at least somebody's, they were making those crude attempts.
Yes, his story's very interesting of how they, and he was one of the children that survived the Montauk, but many of them didn't.
Yeah. I've met one that a while back who said she had been part of the experiments, and she didn't describe it fondly.
Well, and that's another thing, too, that I feel that a lot of people that are targeted were put into this program for the trauma base of it, because they keep targets constantly traumatized. Exactly. And I feel they're feeding off of that energy of the trauma.
It does. And so that's actually part of the challenge for people who are targeted, is not to get in fear and to actually direct love at whoever's attacking them, because that's what disempowers them and disarms them. I was having a conversation with a guy the other day who was discussing that very thing. And, even if you're not a targeted individual, when you live in fear, you're going to attract things to you from that fear. So when you truly understand your power as a creator, you really have to focus on love and loving everyone, including those who may attack you. And usually when you do that, it diffuses it, and it can even go away. And so, but when you stay in a fear vibration and have this us against them mentality and those kinds of things, then you're just going to perpetuate it.
And that is so hard, because we are totally surrounded by these people who watch us 24/7, and as soon as we leave our houses, they're in.
Yeah, I've had my lessons in it, and I've just learned that I just stay focused in love and direct love towards everyone.
Well, it's kind of weird that you said that, because I just got sick Wednesday because I touched a blanket that had poison poured on it, and my arms were numb, my hands were numb, and I went and put frankincense oil on, and I concentrated on changing the pain I was going through into something positive, and I got my feeling back in my hands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we can absolutely do this.
We can, and we're very powerful. I had the fortune of working with Martin Luther King's family and Coretta Scott King, Martin Luther King's wife, and the one thing that really impressed me about them was that they were so loving and so down to earth and egalitarian. They didn't put on any airs. They stayed out of ego, and they truly lived what Martin Luther King had taught. And they've had their house bombed. They've had all kinds of horrible things happen to them, and yet through it all, they survived and they thrived. And they were deeply loved by a lot of people on the planet for what they sacrificed. And so, ultimately love does triumph over everything else. And so we really have to focus on that and stay loving amidst all of what's going on. Because ultimately, everything that's going on this planet is just a game of consciousness that we've agreed to come in and play. If it was a utopia and everything was wonderful and perfect, it'd be nice for a while, particularly, needing a vacation from it right now as we do. But ultimately, it would get pretty boring. And so, we all create these mountains to climb individually in our lives and as a species and a race and, beyond just our race. And so we have to keep that in mind that, I was griping about the Bush family once upon a time to these reptiles, and they said, well, actually, it takes a higher consciousness to come in and play the bad guy than it does the good guy. And I had never thought about that before. I was like, wow. It's like, from what they were saying, that it actually takes some very evolved beings to come into this reality and play the bad guy and take all of the karma that comes with it and that kind of stuff. And so I thought,
well, they can have the karma. They deserve it.
Yeah. Yeah. But, so it really, when you meet beings of very high, loving vibrational consciousness, they don't think in terms of victimhood, and they don't think in the usual terms that we do. And so I strive to heal myself and clear myself continually so that I'm not operating in a frequency that's going to attract those kinds of things. And, it also, too, it reminds me of an example. Years ago when I was living in North Carolina, there was some guy that lived out in the country, and he got involved in this shootout at his home with the police over something. And he had his family held hostage in the house, and he ultimately wound up shooting all of them and killing himself. But while the standoff was going on and there's this gunfire being exchanged between the police and him, there was a puppy that was in the house that somehow just got out and just was meandering from the house out to the police in the midst of all this gunfire and stuff going on. And the puppy was completely unscathed and, of course, unaware of what was even going on. And I've certainly seen that with myself on occasions where, just because I operate the way that I do and I think the way that I do, I've been completely oblivious to things that, when, say, unsavory characters came around, I just didn't appear as a threat to them, and therefore they left me alone. And so, that's happened many times. I used to, when I was in college, I've traveled around the world, and I've gone into some of the worst ghettos and barrios in the world and never had a problem because I treated the people with love and respect, and they did the same with me, and I wound up having a great time.
Yeah.
So it really, you really have to stay out of the fear vibration and stay in love and do that throughout your life.
And, they try to keep us in a fear vibration with the news, and I refuse to watch half of the movies they put out because it's all gore and horror, and I'm not into scaring myself to death.
Exactly. Well, especially now, if you, for example, there's a really wonderful online television program called Gaiam TV. That's GAIAM TV.com. And they have nothing but empowering, uplifting information. And when you sit and watch these programs there, it's not all entertainment. It's informative, and you've got whistleblowers, interviews, and all kinds of cool stuff. But when you sit and watch that, and then you flip over to, say, Netflix or something else, it's so blatantly obvious that everything in the movies and television now is designed to impart fear in people and negativity. All of it, not some of it, every last bit of it. And so you have to unplug from that. You have to stop watching television, unplug from mainstream media, and surround yourself with uplifting, loving people and events and activities and, not attract that kind of stuff. And when you do that, your whole life changes.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you something that one of the targets had called me and told me that she experienced one night. And a lot of us targets live in fear at night. This was an elderly woman in her 70s out in the country in Texas, and and at night is when they do come and do stuff to people, and so I'm sure she was in a fear mode that night. But she said that something would come to her window and scratch all the time, and it was scaring her. Well, then she called me and told me that the strangest thing had happened, that she saw a little white orb circle around in her living room, and then it attached to her extension cord and started glowing. She said, and I swear to God, it was drawing energy out of the cord.
Mm-hmm. Could be. But again, it goes back to, us creating our reality. If we truly create our reality, which I believe we do based on my experience, then you have to look at all that and not ask, why am I creating this, but who am I being that's attracting this? And so, because I've had a lot of those kinds of experiences myself, some of them are really terrifying. And like I said, I was in fear for a couple of years of being abducted by ETs after having that ET encounter, even though there was no reason or evidence for it other than just seeing that and my programming kicking in. So, we have to really work on ourselves and do healing work and clearing our programming to let go of that stuff and not attract any of the negative stuff, and in fact do the opposite, but attract very positive things and beings and angels, whatever you want to call it, and people who can help and protect and those kinds of things, and also, create miracles for yourself. Because I've seen that as well. I've seen many people who have had very close calls in various ways that were just fine, like the puppy, because of where they were operating vibrationally.
That's weird that you said. I've done that before. I've gotten into predicaments where I thought I was going to be harmed terribly, and I called upon my angels and created miracles and got out of it.
Mm-hmm.
One was they threw my dog out on the pond, and she went through, and I was calling her, and she wasn't coming back in. So I ran outside, and I had my bathrobe on and slippers in 3 feet of snow, and I was running all over the yard looking for her, and then I found her. Well, by the time I got to find her, she had already been in the water for 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. So I knew there was no time to call anybody. Mm-hmm. So I laid on the ice and went out there like a worm and pulled her up on the ice next to me, and when I pulled her up on the ice next to me, we both went through. Mm. Now, I picked her up and threw her as hard as I could, and she got up on the shore, but then I was in her predicament. Mm. And, again, I had communication that told me to start jumping up on the ice and busting it to get over to the edge where the cattails were, which I did, but it took me 20 minutes. I should have had hypothermia by then.
Exactly. Well, that's it. There have been many examples, for example, of people walking on hot coals and stuff, and, scientific studies done showing that, that human beings can put out a cooling effect through their feet to keep from getting burned on hot coals. And that's exactly it when you understand. And, there also, I think, David Blaine, the magician, he's done these things where he gets embedded in a block of ice or ice water for hours and hours, sometimes days. What he's doing, I've seen him do this. He goes into a meditation state that you can learn in Vipassana meditation, where you disconnect your consciousness from your physical body, and you can regulate a lot of what's going on in the body, and you do not feel hot or cold or pain. And I've experienced that. I've been in these meditative states where you could have, hammered a nail through my hand, and it wouldn't have bothered me one bit. And there are instances of Indian gurus doing those kinds of things, shoving, needles or nails and things through themselves, not bleeding, and, healing instantaneously, those kinds of things. So we do have that power. One
of the techniques that I will use when being radiated is I visualize being shielded, and then I visualize it deflecting back to where it comes from.
Exactly. Or even better, just dissolving into something that's beneficial.
Well, what I always say is I lovingly deflect this negative energy back to its source to be judged by the light. Mm. So, but I feel that's their karma. Mm-hmm. And I do know that they got a big bundle of karma. Have you ever heard of Dolores Cannon?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I have researched her quite a bit. She passed away.
No, I didn't.
Oh, yeah, she passed away a couple months ago.
Oh, wow. No, that's too bad. I loved her.
Yeah, she was a real light bearer. But, yeah, she talks about when she does past life regression, about the ETs talking to her through these people, and most of the things that you talk about, the mining for gold, and she also talks about the pole shift.
It's interesting when you speak of that. Just the other day, a friend of mine on Facebook shared a video of a clip of Bashar channeling. And Bashar has a lot of good information from what I've seen. And somebody asked him, what's up with the chemtrailing? And he said basically that it was a misguided attempt by some people on our planet to fix the atmosphere. And he said they're, of course, using toxic chemicals that won't work. But he said if they were using, guess what, gold, that it would heal the atmosphere.
Well, that'd be an expensive heal. Them bankers would have to loosen up their money belts, wouldn't they?
Well, actually not. That's the false information we've been given, is that gold and diamonds and certain things are so rare. It's been shown you can make monoatomic gold and monatomic elements from all kinds of things. For example, sand, plain old sand, is loaded with gold. And I've got an interview on my blog, freshandaliveblog.com, with a scientist who is a Los Alamos materials engineer named John Milewski. And he showed that you could take bottle glass, plain old pickle jars and Coke bottles, and powder them up and put them inside of a magnetic ceramic bottle and heat it up in a microwave. And when glass is inside of a magnetic field, it will melt in a microwave field. And so the glass melts, and then what happens is platinum and gold and rhodium and iridium and these platinum group metals start precipitating out. So he proved that these ormus elements, including gold, is hiding just within plain old sand, and there's astronomical amounts of it on this planet. And that's just sand. I mean, also volcanic minerals are very high in it. So we've been lied to about, how much gold is on this planet, and even the gold that has been harvested and collected is apparently far, far more than the official count that we've been told.
Why do they lie to us about everything?
To maintain control and power.
Yeah.
You have to understand, like I said, that, from the very beginning of ET intervention on this planet, these people were given secret knowledge to maintain power over others and manage power over others. And so they were given this information and managed themselves through fear from these ETs, particularly the reptiles. So, they've had it in their DNA and their blood for thousands of years, and they don't know how to do it otherwise. This is a thing that I realize when I get around people of various types. Everyone has their programming, and they typically do not know how to get out of their own programming. And when somebody is in these deep psychopathic states, they can't even comprehend compassion. It's beyond their comprehension unless they have a transformational experience. And so that's really what we've got to do, is provide transformational experiences for all of these these people in pain and in power, to show them a way out. Many of them want out but don't know how to get out.
Well, as far as the ETs go, or the reptilians, now I've seen a lot of videos where newscasters have reptilian eyes, like the cat eye, and they also say that the queen is part reptilian. What do you know about these things?
Well, definitely the ETs, particularly the reptiles that I encountered, they did talk about shape-shifting reptiles on the planet, and they did say that their royal family and certain leaders around the world were reptilian shapeshifters. So, what I was told jives with that. David Icke is probably the main person that's been disseminating that information, and he's been getting it many years ago from a woman named Barbara Marciniak, who channeled that, and also an African Zulu shaman named Credo Mutwa. But I would say my experience and what I've been told jives with that. But the reptilians aren't the only ones involved, but they've been the main ones involved in our history because of their coming here and mining the gold.
Now, I from the research, some of the research I did on the Queen, I heard that they picked Diana because they were their bloodline was going too much in the reptilian direction.
Yeah, I was just told by these ETs that they wanted to harvest her DNA through the bloodline, but they didn't, for some reason, want to keep her in the bloodline. So I don't know the details on it, but that was just because of what I've been told.
Well, from what I found out is that she was planning on exposing them, telling the truth, and that's why they made sure that she was silenced.
That makes sense.
Yeah, well, isn't that the protocol?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sometimes I wonder why I'm still around.
Well, don't think that way. I intend to be around a long time, and you probably will.
Well, I don't have any fear. My take on the way I feel right now is that I've come here to do things, and that I'm going to do them regardless of what anybody else says, because I have a plan, and this is my plight. This is my path, And I don't fear dying because I don't think that we die when we die.
Well, I was very fortunate when I was 20 years old. I've actually had 2 near-death experiences, and one of them was in a motorcycle wreck, and another one was falling out of a tree. And that taught me that, our physical bodies are just containers for our spirit. So I'm not concerned about not continuing on or anything like that. But I love 3D reality, and I love living here at this time in this place. And so I like to stick around for a while and, not go prematurely.
Well, when we get up every day, we're one day closer to the end of our life. So, whenever it comes, that's when it's written in the book.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it. I don't worry about what if.
Exactly.
That's what we got to get rid of.
Yeah. Yeah, and life becomes very magical when you eat magical food and you keep these poisons out of your body and you open up the chakras and the meridians and the energy flows, and then you just go with God rather than trying to force agendas in your life, and it is much easier. It just flows.
Let's talk about our water, because actually our water is life.
Right. Water's a really wonderful subject, and I'm actually right now putting together several different solutions for having healthy water in various price ranges. But water is far, far beyond just chemistry that typically that people deal with water purification. They just think it's chemistry. It's not. As I mentioned before, water responds to being exposed to chemicals or energy, filtration, heat, pressurization. All those things affect the clustering of water molecules and the bond angle of the H2O and other things, which, by the way, is the basis of homeopathy. Homeopathy is the practice of taking different materials like, say, plant juices or essences and putting them into water and then percussing the water or shocking the water by striking the vessel that it's in while you dilute the water. And you dilute it over and over again, and you percuss it and dilute it and percuss it. And you keep doing that. And what happens is you ultimately wind up with water that has no measurable chemical presence left in it, but when that water is ingested, it will trigger a healing response in the body. And the reason it does that is because the energetic signature of what you put into it is still there through the clustering of the water. It creates a pattern in the water that conveys information to the body. And water is actually a conveyor of consciousness. That's one of its properties. And so that's why, when your emotions, there have been studies done in epigenetics showing that when you're upset or whatever state of mind that you're in and your emotions are in, that will affect the water in your body and the health in your body.
Yeah.
So water,
body is 2/3 water.
Exactly. So water is very, very crucial in maintaining health and in maintaining consciousness. And, natural water is supposed to have gone through the full hydrological cycle of the earth where, it evaporates from the surface, it goes up into the atmosphere, it's charged by lightning and by sound and thunder, all kinds of different animal sounds, all these different types of energy frequencies, cosmic radiation, solar radiation, all this stuff bombards the water in the atmosphere with frequencies and information, and then that water condenses down. And unfortunately, of course, these days there's a lot of pollution and radioactivity and things like that also affecting it. Mm-hmm. But it comes down to the earth, and it showers across plants and soil, and plants themselves are scalar wave transceivers. They're like antennas that reach into the ground. Their roots reach into the ground and absorb scalar frequencies from the center of the earth. They reach up into the atmosphere and they absorb cosmic radiation and solar radiation. You've got this quantum process going on with photosynthesis. And so plants are these energy to matter converters. You take a little tiny acorn, for example, and stick it in the ground, and you get this gigantic oak tree with huge amounts of mass. Well, where does that mass come from? You don't see a gigantic hole in the ground. It's converting energy directly into matter. And so you've got this amazing quantum process going on with all this energetics, and that rain comes washing down over it, and it's imparted with the frequencies of the plants, and becomes very generally very healing, and it gets structured according to what plants it's coming across. Then it washes down into the soil, and along with the frequencies that the roots are picking up and transmitting, you've also got fungus mycelium, which are imparting frequencies into the soil. Mycelium are fungus roots that are like an internet for the fungus in the soil, and it allows communication to happen between the fungus in the soil and the plants and the microbes and the insects living in the soil. So you've got this whole massive matter-energy system of life going on just in soil, and that water's washing through it, picking up all of these frequencies, and then also it's picking up these ormus elements, these superconducting monoatomic minerals, and those are extremely sensitive to energy in fields. They can pick up, these ormus elements can pick up frequencies from planets and celestial energies coming from many, many light years away. So the water picks all of that up and gets structured and picks up the ormus, and the ormus is anti-gravitational. Part of the properties of a superconductor is it's anti-gravitational. So the water wants to levitate up once it's accumulated enough of these monoatomic minerals, but it's trapped in the ground by the soil, so it doesn't until it gets washed down into aquifers and collects enough to where it can rise up to the surface at the aquifers, which is where spring heads occur. And as an interesting side note, by the way, there was a Russian physicist named Alexander Golod who was doing a lot of heavy-duty experiments with pyramids, and he had a multi-million-dollar budget, and he had all the best science in the world available to him. And he made a lot of interesting discoveries, but one of the things that he discovered was outside of some of his pyramids, particularly this large one he built outside of Moscow, springs were popping up all over the place for many miles around his pyramid. And it's because a pyramid is a scalar wave antenna. It's a transceiver that takes the energy coming from the sun and from the center of the earth and brings it into a localized area and creates a localized scalar field, which makes these ormus elements levitate even stronger. And so you get springs popping up. So any spring head is going to have water that's high in ormus. And as long as it's not polluted or has any toxic minerals in it, it's going to be highly regenerative water. So that's the kind of water that we want to be ingesting ideally, is water that's high in these ormus elements and high in bioavailable minerals of very small particle sizes that can get in and feed the cells. Those particles are known as angstrom minerals or monoatomics. So how do we get that water in this modern-day world with all of this toxicity? Well, one way you can get it is by taking spring water and having it tested and making sure that it's not polluted, at least not grossly polluted. And you can filter it, and then you can fix the homeopathy of it if necessary using various methods. One way, a simple way, is by vortexing the water in magnetic fields. There's a device called a water vitalizer that it's about $450, $500 that you can do this in, but it's kind of pricey. So I developed these little blocks that you can put on a blender and do the same thing for about $100. Another option is there is a water purification system you can buy off the shelf that will do all of this. It will take the crappiest polluted tap water and it will purify it using reverse osmosis, but then it will fix the homeopathy by vortexing the water in scalar fields and magnetic fields and adding ormus minerals. So you wind up with this living water with a natural alkaline pH that's very high in ormus. That system is called the Miracule water system, Miracule, Miracule water. Their website is miraculewater.com. So you can do these very simple things, and you can also use microbes. Tiruahiga is using his effective microorganisms to clean up polluted water, because the microbes will eat the toxins, including radioactive elements, and break them down. And actually, if you go to that page on my website, the radiationlinks.freshandalive.com, you can actually see a farmer in Fukushima City using the effective microorganisms on all of his crops, and he has no measurable radioactivity on any of his crops or his soil, when all the farmers around him, their fields and their produce is all highly radioactive and they can't sell it. And this stuff is ridiculously cheap, and you can ferment tons of it yourself. There's also a professor at the University of Birmingham in the UK named Lynn McCaskey, who is using E. coli and other microbes to break down radioactive elements. So this environmental radiation can be cleaned up in various ways. But within water, you can use all these various methods and some others to very simply and affordably clean up your water and make it living water again, and make it extremely healing and detoxifying that's high in ormus elements. And that's what I teach in my workshops and in my various materials online, is how to do those things.
Huh. Well, I had read an article where a physicist had taken water and put it next to a jukebox and played hard rock music, and then looked at it under a microscope, and it was all black and ugly. Then they took other water and put it by a jukebox and played classical music, and it came out crystal clear and blue and snowflake crystallized. So it was absorbing the consciousness of the music.
Absolutely. All kinds of different kinds of energy can structure water, and it's based on the frequencies involved. It's not necessarily the type of music per se as the frequencies. You could have rock and roll music that would structure the water beneficially if its base frequency is one that's harmonious to living organisms. And how do you figure out, what frequencies are harmonious? Well, there's a really simple method, actually. If you go onto YouTube, you can actually, if you search on cymatics experiments, C-Y-M-A-T-I-C-S, cymatics experiment, you'll see these experiments people do where they take a sheet of metal and they put a tone generator underneath it, and they sprinkle sand on the sheet, and then they turn the tone generator on and they dial through frequencies of sound. And as they dial through, you get the sand bouncing around in a chaotic pattern, and all of a sudden when you hit a certain frequency, it'll lock into a geometric pattern. And so all of those frequencies where those geometric patterns occur are harmonious to living organisms. So you can either do your own experiments, or you can just study cymatics and see, what frequencies lock these geometric patterns, and then you can use those frequencies, whether it's music and sound or scalar waves or light or whatever. It's frequency based. So you could create rock and roll music or any kind of music with these harmonious frequencies as their base, and you would get the beneficial effects. And there are musicians that understand this and do that. The reason classical music typically has benefits is because the great masters, they knew this, and they intentionally programmed it into their music. That was part of their genius that is left out of the information about what they did. Mozart and Beethoven and these, they knew what they were doing. They weren't just like, they were certainly channeling beautiful music, but they knew consciously a lot of what they were doing.
Well, that's one of the things that I have found that targets use to disrupt the microwave weapons is to turn classical music on. They don't like it.
Right.
So obviously the notes and the pitches are interfering with the weapons.
Oh, absolutely. Sound is absolutely amazing for healing. You can, for example, crystal bowls. There are people that use crystal bowls for healing.
Yep.
That's phenomenal. I had a friend who did that. She did workshops, and I attended one. And I was amazed. I went with one of my employees, and we sat for 8 hours in this workshop, and she was doing these crystal bowl tonings. And at the end of the day, I detoxed massively. When I got home, I was absolutely exhausted. And, it turned my urine dark from dumping all these toxins and stuff just from being exposed to sound. There's also an amazing woman named Sherry Edwards, and her first name is spelled S-H-A-R-R-Y, and she's got a bioacoustic therapy. If you Google her name and bioacoustic, you'll find her website. And she was gifted with the ability to listen to a person's voice and be able to tell very specifically what health issues they had, and then she can tone and heal them.
Mm-hmm.
So she became renowned for that, and she wanted to be able to spread that ability, so she wound up developing a software and hardware technology that you can use with a computer where you just speak into a microphone and it records your voice, and then it will use software to analyze the sound pattern and tell what issues you have, and then it can program an MP3 player with tones that you can listen to, and it will heal things. So I heard about the technology, and I actually had an experience with it. I had a few experiences with it. My personal experience, I was at a visiting relatives, and I was at a birthday party for one of my niece, and normally, I don't eat cake and stuff like that, and certainly not anything that's not organic. But they had a non-organic chocolate cake at the birthday party, and it was a pool party. So I had a little tiny piece of cake, and then went swimming for about a half an hour in a chlorinated pool, which I never do. And the next morning when I woke up, I was all stuffed up, and my sinuses were all clogged up. And it just so happened I was having dinner that night with a friend who had one of these bioacoustic devices. And she said, well, let's hook you up to the machine and see what happens. And so she did, and she said that what she saw was that the casein and the dairy in the cake combined with the chlorine from the swimming pool and created a toxin that was causing the problem. And so she programmed this MP3 player, and I listened to it for an hour, and I'll tell you what, when I got done, no more stuffiness at all. So I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. But, There's
a lot of YouTube videos that have biorhythms that you can listen to for healing.
Yeah, absolutely. And then later, my brother shattered his foot really badly. He fell off a ladder at work, and the ladder got caught up around his foot and just snapped his leg at the ankle in two and shattered his foot. And he was in such intense pain, he just wanted to die. And the doctors tried to, they pinned his foot together and stuff, but he was in horrific pain, and he wasn't expected to be able to walk for about 6 months, with crutches, and he was going to be bedridden for about 3 months and stuff. So, I got him one of these devices. My friend went and got his voice pattern and then programmed the MP3 player, and he listened to it for 3 hours a day. So after a week passed, I called up to see how he was doing, and, he was completely bedridden, and so my mother was taking care of him. And she answered the phone. I said, well, how's Tim doing? And she said, well, he's doing pretty good. He's out mowing the grass. And I was like, what? And so he came in, I talked to him, and he's not only had he healed up enough to where he didn't have any pain anymore and he felt like he could walk and mow grass, but also what really blew me away was how his mental attitude changed, because up to that point, he'd been very negative, and even before the accident, he just didn't have a very positive outlook on life. And all of a sudden, he was like totally changed. He was very optimistic, and he was like, I'm going to change my life. I'm going to do all these things, and I was like blown away.
So it kind of reprogrammed his thinking.
Yes, just with sound. So the powers that be know this very, very well. That's why they program all these. Oh, yeah, and they program it into all music and movies and everything. We're being bombarded with it. So when you're...
Well, is that why there's a lot of subliminals in music?
Absolutely, and just the frequencies they're based on. All of this music, almost all of it that's commercial, is based in frequencies that are disharmonious to living organisms. So they know very well about this. The music industry and the entertainment industry is heavily, heavily controlled, and there's lots of mind-control programming going on in all of it.
Oh, this I know.
Yeah, so the thing to do is unplug
about mind control programming.
And on the flip side, there's lots and lots of wonderful, amazing musicians out there who are far more talented than these pop musicians, and they're available through the Internet, There are musicians who understand these things about frequency that are programming beneficial healing frequencies into their music.
Yeah.
But if you don't know to look for them and you're operating in fear, you're never going to access them.
Yeah. See, that's the thing. The knowledge is out there, but the people don't know.
Right. And I'm fond of saying it, always. The solutions, when you truly understand that consciousness creates reality, and it's the way that this scalar energy operates, the scalar energy of consciousness, it has polarities, positive, negative polarities. So the frequencies and the polarities that create these problems, simultaneously, always, the solutions are being created at the same time, because it's it's like light and dark, hot and cold, plus and minus charge. You can't have one without the other. And so when you get that, then all you have to do when you have an issue or a problem in your life is start looking for the solution, and you will find it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Ken, well, we're coming up on the end of the show. I'm going to ask if anyone out there would like to ask Ken a question. Please push *8, and we'll let you ask a question real quick. And I want to thank you so much for your time. I would love to have you come back in a month or so and talk to us again, give us some more information.
Okay, my pleasure.
I'm fascinated with the fact that the reptilians gave you information about how to make these devices and cleanse. Why do you think they picked you?
I think it was an agreement that I had before I was even born. We all live in other places and times, and time really is simultaneous. It's not a continuum the way that we think of it. As a matter of fact, the reptiles said to me on more than one occasion that our concept of time is a quaint local custom. And so we're really simultaneously existing in all these different places and times, and therefore we can connect with ourselves in these other places and times and draw strength and information. And these reptiles mentioned that the best advice they gave me actually was about day-to-day living, and the reason was, they said, is because that they have been human in many other lifetimes, and they have conscious memory of it, and they tap into that in order to interact with humans. This particular
Dolores had mentioned that the information, some of the information that she was getting, was that they're actually afraid of the humans. A lot of them are, because they don't understand why we're so violent, and that they cherish life, and that we disregard life so easily with war and murder and violence, and they're afraid of us, that we're too violent.
That's not what I was given from these reptiles. As a matter of fact, they showed me the reptiles generally, it's just like reptiles here on Earth. They don't have emotions the way we do because of the way they're raised. And they had great interest in these other extraterrestrials that I've encountered, had great interest in human nurturing and birth and family structures, because in their society that they showed me, the babies are hatched in communal nurseries, and they never meet their parents, so there's never this bond of nurturing between the parents and the child, and then they're raised in this environment that's kind of dog-eat-dog, and so that's what makes them very psychopathic from our viewpoint and disconnected from their emotions. And so it's the manipulation of the reptiles on this planet with humans that has created this predominance of sociopathic and psychopathic control. It's not the natural human state. The natural human state is what the universe's natural state is, which is a frequency of love. But as with polarities, there are polarities in various places, and right now there's one going on with us.
Okay, well, why don't you give out information on contacting you again real quick before we close out. Okay. And I want to thank you again for your time. It was a wonderful 2 hours. It went by really fast, didn't it?
It did. Yeah, my main website is freshandalive.com. My blog is beyondrawfood.com. I'm on Facebook. My name is Ken Rolha, Rohla. And I'm on YouTube. If you search on my name, you'll pull up my channel there. And so Facebook is probably the best way to see, what I'm doing on a regular basis.
Well, thank you so much, Ken, for your time. You have a blessed weekend, and I will be in touch with you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.